Hello everybody and welcome back to Operation Logistics, where we are currently implementing get distance to owned building in building hexes. So, get distance to a particular owned building? Let's go ahead and rename this again actually to nearest owned building in building hexes. So I think the best way to do this is we need to pass in building, or rather building from building. So we're going to need to pass that in for sure. And then the building here will pass in itself. And then in the hex manager, we're going to need to go ahead and figure out which owned building is the nearest one. So first things first, if business.ownedhexes.count equals 0 if there's nothing in the list, well, return -1 because there are no owned buildings. Okay, so with that there, we can then try to determine which building is nearest. So I think the best way to do that would be the good old algorithm we've been using. So float nearest dist equals mathf.infinity. We're just going to need to iterate through them, I think. I don't think there's any other real way around it, and just check them all. Then building nearest building equals null for now. For each building, well, owned hexes is in an int3, right? Yeah, so we'll go ahead and do an int3 nearest building equals null. Nearest building hex, we'll call it. And this, of course, would need to be int3.null. And then for each int3 building in business.ownedhexes, then we would just need to iterate through these and say, let's see, do we have a way to turn an int3 into a vector3? I feel like we should, and yeah, that's fine, World of Warships. I don't know why you updated. I have literally never played you since I installed you, but whatever. So, do we have the ability to, yes, get building hex position? Excellent. So with that, it would be pretty easy to just say vector3, and in fact up here, we're going to want to do vector3 from location equals from building dot location. Of course, that's an int3, so we're going to want to go ahead and convert that over with get building hex position, like so. Okay, and then vector3 to location would be equals get building hex position, and this would be building.location. Of course, this is an int3, so we can just directly pass in building, like so. And then we just need to determine if this is closer than the nearest distance, and for that we're just going to use square magnitude. No reason to do a slow square root call here. So we'll just do float dist equals, in parentheses, from location minus to location dot square magnitude. And then if dist is less than nearest dist, then we can very easily just do nearest dist equals dist, and finally nearest building hex equals building. Okay, so that returns us our nearest building hex. That said, we don't actually need that. We're returning a float, so realistically we can get rid of that, and then down here simply return nearest dist. Okay, now if that's an exceptionally long list, that might become slow. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a to-do here. This might become a pretty slow algorithm if the player has a ton of buildings. Potential optimization location. Okay, so there's that. So we now have our get distance to nearest owned building in building hexes method. And we use it in the building, which is here for some reason. So then if we are close enough, and this is in building hexes. Oh, right. That is in building hexes. Which means we probably want to pathfind it, right? We have our int3s. Or we have one of our int3s. We would need to put this back. int3 nearest building hex equals int3.null. And then we would want to do nearest building... Oh, come on. Nearest building hex equals building. Like that. And then rather than returning nearest dist, we would want to do something like list int3. Right? Pathfind returns a list of int3? I think so. Let's check it. Pathfinding. Pathfind building to vector 3. Okay, it's a list of vector 3s. That's fine. I can work with that. So in the hex manager, we want a list of vector 3. Realistically, all we're interested in here is the actual count of vector 3s. We're not super interested in where they are or how we get there. All we care about is the number of steps. So list vector 3 path equals pathfinding dot pathfind building to vector 3. This will be building from building 2. Okay. So we would need to get building hex by index, and then we would pass in our from location, which of course would be our from building here. And actually, we are passing in a building. So from building, and then our to building would of course be nearest building hex. And realistically, we don't need this to be an int3, do we? I mean, we kind of need to convert it anyway, so I guess this is fine. We'll just convert it once here. So get building, if I can type, get building hex by index, and then we would of course pass in nearest building hex. There we go. And then the hex manager would just be this. Right? Oh, this is the building hex. Just get building by index? Yeah, that's more like it. And then it would just go ahead and pathfind building to vector 3, and then rather than returning nearest dist, since we are returning it in building hexes, in the number of hexes, we want to just return path.count. I mean, realistically, rather than this being a float, this could just be an int. No real reason for it to be a float. Which would mean that this could be just expecting an integer as well. Seems fine. Now, the other thing is, this is going to be being called a lot. Like, this is going to be being called a way lot. On every single building, on every single minute. Which makes me think that perhaps we should store this and then re-update it when the business list of owned hexes changes, or something along those lines, or maybe run this generation first So, like, get rid of this, cut that, and then just do this check first. And then only if we succeed that check do we run if close enough to player structure. That should speed things up a little bit, I think, because then we wouldn't have to iterate through that list. In fact, that should speed things up a pretty sizable amount, I would think. I am wondering why it runs all of this on every building. Like, does it? It should only run it if it's owned, right? Do we have a tag in here for if we own it? I feel like we don't. Anyway, let's take a quick look at the performance of that. I do want to go ahead and in the parcel manager, we aren't technically generating the parcel. That's something we'll need to be doing here in a moment. But I just want to debug.log spawned a parcel at plus from building dot location dot toString. Okay, so then it'll tell us that it spawned a parcel at a particular location. It shouldn't spawn any parcels if we don't own a building, right? Well, what does it return? Oh, wait. I just thought of something. Yep. If we don't own any buildings, it's going to be returning up here. Oh, where did I put that? It's here somewhere. Close enough to player structure. It returns false here. Okay, yeah. That should actually be fine then, because get distance... Oh, wait, no. So, if get distance to nearest building in building hexes is less than 25, but if we don't own any building hexes, if we go into the hex manager, we can see that it returns -1. There are no owned buildings. That's less than 25. If you don't own any buildings, it's going to count every single possible building as available for generation of packages. That's not ideal. Yeah, that's definitely not ideal. Okay, so we should have this return like int.max. I don't know, maybe just 1,000. Sure. We'll just have it return 1,000. Okay. We'll let that compile up. And let's go ahead and run this. We are going to see if this does anything, if this generates any packages whatsoever. So we're going to need to test it with no owned buildings first, and it should not generate any packages, but we're going to see what the performance is like with no owned buildings. I don't know if it'll be awful. It may or may not. We'll see. And also, this package generation is something we might want to consider offloading onto a second thread. It's a possibility. Is this going to start? I'm a little confused by what it's doing here. I had Task Manager open before, but I don't now because of the restart that I had to do in the last episode. But, this doesn't seem to be going. What would be causing it to not go here? Get distance to nearest own bit. Like, none of the things that we changed should do anything, right? Like, at this point, we shouldn't be causing any changes. Unless there's just a massive amount of debug logs that's coming out for some reason? But this is the only debug log we added. I don't know. I'm not sure why this is not starting up. It's clearly not, though. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put a cut in here, and I'm going to let it run for a bit and see if I can figure out what it's doing, and in the next episode, we'll test this. See you all then.